What if everything you believe about death is wrong? What if the very fear that keeps you awake at night is nothing more than a cruel illusion, or perhaps the only authentic response to our human condition? Tonight, in a dimly lit corner of a timeless tavern where philosophy meets reality, two of history's most profound thinkers sit across from each other, nursing their drinks and preparing to confront the ultimate question that haunts every human soul. The amber glow of candlelight flickers across weathered faces, casting shadows that dance like the very thoughts they're about to exchange. Lucius Annaeus Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher who faced his own death with legendary composure, swirls his wine thoughtfully. His eyes carry the weight of someone who has already made peace with mortality. Across from him, Albert Camus, the French-Algerian writer and philosopher, lights another cigarette with hands that have typed some of the most beautiful meditations on the absurdity of existence. The smoke curls upward, like questions that refuse to be answered. The tavern itself seems to hold its breath. Other patrons have gradually drifted away, leaving these two intellectual giants in their own world of discourse. The bartender polishes glasses quietly, occasionally glancing over at the table where the fate of human understanding about death itself hangs in the balance. "Oh, you know," Seneca begins, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has counseled emperors and faced exile, "I've been thinking about what you wrote in The Stranger. Your character Meursault, standing before his execution, suddenly seeing the gentle indifference of the world." He pauses, studying Camus' face. "But I wonder if you've mistaken clarity for despair." Camus exhales slowly, his dark eyes never leaving Seneca's. "And I wonder if you've mistaken resignation for wisdom, my friend." His Algerian accent adds a musical quality to his words, each syllable carefully chosen. "Your Stoicism speaks of accepting death as natural, but perhaps what you call acceptance is simply a sophisticated form of denial." The philosophical battle lines are drawn. Here sits Seneca, who believed death was nothing more than a return to the state we were in before birth, a natural conclusion to the temporary loan of life. And there sits Camus, who saw death as the ultimate absurdity that gives urgency and meaning to our rebellion against meaninglessness. But this isn't a sterile academic debate. These are two men who lived their philosophies, who faced real suffering, real exile, real mortality. Seneca, who was forced to take his own life by Nero's command, drinking poison with the same calm he advocated in his letters. Camus, who died tragically young in a car accident, leaving behind unfinished thoughts about the human condition. The weight of their personal experiences hangs heavy in the air. Every word they speak carries the gravity of lived truth, not merely theoretical speculation. They're not just debating death, they're confronting the most fundamental question of human existence. How should we live knowing that we must die? "Tell me something, Albert," Seneca continues, leaning forward slightly. "When you wrote about Sisyphus pushing his boulder up the mountain for eternity, you said we must imagine him happy. But why should happiness matter if death makes everything meaningless?" Camus takes a long draw from his cigarette, the ember glowing bright in the tavern's warm darkness. "Because that's precisely when happiness matters most, Lucius. Not in spite of death, but because of it. The very fact that this conversation will end, that this cigarette will burn down to nothing, that tomorrow the sun will rise on a world where we might not exist, that's what makes this moment precious." The philosophical tension is palpable. Here are two brilliant minds approaching the same fundamental reality from completely different angles. One sees death as the ultimate teacher of how to live. The other sees it as the ultimate absurdity that forces us to create our own meaning. Outside the tavern, the world continues its relentless march toward morning. People are being born, others are dying. Most are sleeping peacefully, unaware that their deepest fears and hopes about mortality are being dissected by two masters of human understanding. "But consider this," Seneca responds, his voice gaining momentum. "If death truly makes everything meaningless, then why does your philosophy spend so much energy fighting against that meaninglessness? Your very rebellion suggests that somewhere deep down, you believe meaning exists." Camus smiles, a mixture of appreciation and challenge crossing his features. "Ah, now you're getting to the heart of it. The meaning doesn't exist out there, waiting to be discovered like some philosophical treasure. We create it moment by moment, choice by choice, precisely because we know it will all end." The debate is just beginning, but already the fundamental divide is clear. This isn't just about death, it's about the entire human project. How we understand our mortality shapes everything. How we love, how we work, how we face suffering, how we find joy. As the night deepens and the philosophical battle intensifies, Both men know they're grappling with questions that have no easy answers, only deeper, more beautiful complexities. The candle between them burns lower, casting longer shadows as Sêneca settles into his argument like a general positioning his troops. He's fought this battle before, in letters to friends, in conversations with fellow philosophers, in the quiet moments before sleep, when mortality whispers its questions. "Let me tell you a story, Albert," Sêneca begins, his voice taking on the tone of someone who has learned wisdom through suffering. "When I was exiled to Corsica by Emperor Claudius, I thought my life was over. 8 years in that barren place, separated from everything I loved. But it was there I learned something profound about death." He pauses, watching Camus' reaction. The younger philosopher listens intently, recognizing the weight of lived experience in his companion's words. "I realized that I had been dead already. Dead to Rome, dead to my former life, dead to all my previous identities. And yet, I continued to exist, to think, to find meaning in my studies. Death, I understood, is not the opposite of life. It's simply life's natural boundary, like the shore is the ocean's natural boundary." Camus shifts in his chair, already formulating his response. "But you're making my point for me, Lucius. Your exile wasn't death. It was a profound disruption that forced you to confront the absurdity of your situation. You didn't accept it peacefully. You struggled with it, then found ways to create meaning within it." No, you misunderstand," Sêneca responds, his hands moving expressively. "I didn't create meaning, I discovered it. The meaning was always there, in the simple fact of existence itself. Every morning I woke up in exile, I had a choice, to see my situation as absurd and meaningless, or to recognize it as part of the natural order. The philosophical divide deepens. Sêneca represents a worldview where meaning is inherent in the universe's rational structure, where death is simply part of a cosmic order that human reason can understand and accept. Camus represents a modern sensibility that sees no inherent meaning anywhere, forcing humans to create their own significance in the face of an indifferent universe. "But consider the implications of your position," Camus interjects, leaning forward with intensity. "If death is natural and acceptable, if it's just part of some grand rational order, then why do we instinctively fight against it? Why does every cell in our body struggle to survive? Why do we mourn the dead with such intensity if their deaths are simply natural?" Sêneca nods appreciatively. "Because we confuse our animal instincts with our rational understanding. Yes, our bodies fight death. That's their programming. But our minds, our reasoning faculties, can transcend that programming. We mourn because we're attached, and attachment is the source of suffering." "Attachment," Camus repeats the word like he's tasting something bitter. "You speak of human love, human connection, human passion as if they're diseases to be cured. But what if they're precisely what makes us human? What if the absurdity isn't something to be resolved through rational acceptance, but something to be embraced as the foundation of authentic living?" The bartender glances over again, sensing the intensity of their exchange. These aren't casual opinions being traded. These are fundamental worldviews in collision. Sêneca takes a measured sip of his wine. "I don't advocate for the elimination of love or passion, Albert. I advocate for loving without clinging, for caring without desperation. When we accept death as natural, we can love more fully because we're not constantly terrified of loss." "But that's exactly what I'm challenging," Camus responds, his cigarette forgotten between his fingers. "You say accept death as natural, but death isn't natural for conscious beings like us. We're the only creatures cursed with the knowledge of our own mortality. That's what makes us human, and what makes our situation fundamentally absurd." "Cursed?" Sêneca questions. "Or blessed? Our awareness of death is what allows us to live philosophically, to make rational choices about how to spend our limited time. Without that awareness, we'd be no different from animals following their instincts." Camus laughs, but it's not a sound of amusement. "There you go again, treating our human condition as if it's a problem to be solved, rather than a reality to be lived. You want to philosophize away the terror, the beauty, the passion, the grief, all the things that make existence meaningful precisely because it ends. The debate reveals something deeper, two fundamentally different approaches to human consciousness itself. Sêneca sees reason as humanity's highest faculty, capable of achieving a kind of transcendence over the messy realities of mortal existence. Camus sees that same reason as the source of our predicament, making us aware of meaninglessness, while simultaneously compelling us to create meaning anyway. "Let me ask you this," Sêneca continues. his tone becoming more personal. If you truly believe existence is absurd and death makes everything meaningless, why haven't you followed your logic to its conclusion? Why continue living at all? It's a direct challenge, and Camus meets it head-on, because that would be the ultimate surrender to the absurd. Suicide wouldn't solve the problem of meaninglessness. It would simply be an admission of defeat. The authentic response is to live fully, create meaning, love passionately, work meaningfully, all while knowing it will end. So you choose to live in contradiction, Sêneca observes. I choose to live authentically, Camus replies, which means embracing the contradiction rather than explaining it away. Camus extinguishes his cigarette and immediately reaches for another, his movements deliberate and almost ritualistic. The small flame from his lighter illuminates his face for a moment, revealing eyes that have seen too much of human suffering to accept easy consolations. You know what troubles me about your stoicism, Lucius, he says, exhaling smoke that mingles with the tavern's warm air. It's too clean, too neat. Life isn't neat. Death certainly isn't neat. You've created this beautiful philosophical system that explains away the very things that make us most human. Sêneca furrows his brow, clearly intrigued by the challenge. Explain what you mean by too clean. Well, take your famous letters to Lucilius, Camus begins, referring to Seneca's philosophical correspondence. You write about death with such composure, such rational acceptance. But what about the mother who loses her child? What about the young person cut down by disease? What about the random, meaningless deaths that happen every day? Your philosophy works beautifully for philosophers sitting in comfortable rooms, but does it work for real human suffering? The question hangs in the air like a challenge thrown down between dueling knights. Sêneca has spent years developing his philosophy of rational acceptance, but Camus is asking him to defend it against the raw, irrational reality of human pain. I've seen suffering, Albert, Sêneca responds quietly. I've lost friends. I've been separated from loved ones. I've faced my own mortality. The philosophy doesn't eliminate pain. It provides a framework for understanding it. A framework, Camus repeats. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. You've built a beautiful framework, but frameworks can become prisons. When you explain away the absurdity of death, you also explain away the preciousness of life. When you make death rational, you make life less urgent, less immediate, less vital. Camus leans back, his eyes never leaving Seneca's face. Let me tell you about Algeria, about the sun and the sea and the mountains where I grew up. Every day there was beautiful, not because it was part of some rational cosmic order, but because it was finite, fragile, temporary. The light was precious precisely because it would fade. The warmth mattered because winter would come. But surely you see the contradiction in your position, Sêneca interjects. You speak of beauty and preciousness, but if everything is truly absurd and meaningless, then beauty itself is meaningless. You can't have it both ways. Either things matter or they don't. Camus smiles, and for the first time tonight it's a smile of genuine warmth rather than philosophical combat. That's where you misunderstand me completely, my friend. I'm not saying things don't matter. I'm saying they matter desperately, urgently, because we make them matter. The absurd isn't the absence of meaning. It's the gap between our need for meaning and the universe's silence. So meaning comes from human choice, Sêneca asks. Meaning comes from human rebellion, Camus corrects. From our refusal to accept that the silence means we should stop asking questions. From our insistence on creating beauty, love, justice, even though the universe offers no guarantees, no cosmic backing for these values. The philosophical battle has shifted ground. Where before they debated the nature of death, now they're exploring the source of meaning itself. Sêneca believes meaning is discovered through rational understanding of cosmic order. Camus believes meaning is created through human rebellion against cosmic indifference. But consider the practical implications, Sêneca argues. If meaning comes only from human choice and rebellion, then it's arbitrary. What one person chooses to value, another can choose to dismiss. You've removed any objective foundation for ethics, for justice, for the very values you claim to champion. Camus shakes his head vigorously. No, that's exactly backwards. When you ground meaning in cosmic order or divine command or rational necessity, you make it abstract, distant from human experience. But when meaning comes from human choice, it becomes intensely personal, intensely real. I choose to value justice, not because the universe commands it, but because injustice offends my deepest sense of human dignity. And if someone else chooses differently, Sêneca presses. Then we argue, we persuade, we fight if necessary, but we do it as humans talking to humans, not as servants of some cosmic principle. The meaning is more real, not less, because it emerges from human experience rather than philosophical abstraction. The tavern around them has grown quieter, as if the very walls are listening to this fundamental debate about how conscious beings should understand their existence. The candle flame wavers slightly, casting moving shadows that seem to dance in rhythm with their words. "You're asking people to live without hope," Sêneca observes, "without the consolation of knowing their lives fit into a larger purpose." "I'm asking people to live without illusions," Camus responds, "but hope, real hope, comes from human solidarity, from our shared struggle against absurdity. When I see someone fighting for justice knowing they'll probably fail, when I see someone creating art knowing it will eventually be forgotten, when I see someone loving deeply knowing they'll lose what they love, that's when I see real hope. Not hope for cosmic rescue, but hope in human dignity." "And death?" Sêneca asks quietly. "How does your rebellious human dignity help when facing mortality?" Camus takes a long draw from his cigarette, considering. "It doesn't make death less final, if that's what you're asking, but it makes life more urgent. When you truly accept that this conversation will end, that this cigarette will burn down, that tomorrow might not come, then every word becomes precious. Not because it serves some cosmic purpose, but because it's ours. So you live more intensely because life is temporary? I live more authentically because life is absurd," Camus clarifies. "The temporary nature is just part of the absurdity. But yes, urgency comes from finitude. If we lived forever, would this conversation matter as much? Would anything?" Sêneca considers this, recognizing the challenge to his entire philosophical framework. The Stoic seeks tranquility through rational acceptance. The absurdist seeks authenticity through passionate engagement. Both philosophies attempt to address human mortality, but they lead to fundamentally different ways of living. The night has reached its deepest point, and with it the conversation ventures into more dangerous territory. Both men sense they're approaching the core of their disagreement, the place where philosophical differences become matters of existential urgency. Sêneca sets down his wineglass with deliberate care. "Albert, I need to understand something about your position. You speak beautifully about human dignity and rebellion, but I keep coming back to a fundamental question. If death truly makes everything meaningless, if the universe is truly indifferent to human values, then why should anyone choose dignity over degradation? Why choose rebellion over submission?" It's perhaps the most challenging question Sêneca could pose, and Camus recognizes its weight. He's silent for a long moment, the cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. "Because," Camus finally responds, "the alternative is to become complicit in our own dehumanization. When we accept that meaning must come from outside ourselves, from gods, from cosmic order, from rational systems, we surrender the one thing that makes us truly human, our capacity to create value through choice." "But that doesn't answer the question," Sêneca presses. "Why choose humanization over dehumanization if both are equally meaningless in cosmic terms?" Camus looks directly at Sêneca, and his voice takes on an intensity that transforms the entire atmosphere of their debate. "Because I've seen what happens when people accept that their choices don't matter. I've seen fascism, Lucius. I've seen what happens when people decide that individual human dignity is less important than abstract principles or cosmic orders." The reference to fascism isn't casual. Camus lived through the Nazi occupation of France, worked in the resistance, saw firsthand what happens when people surrender their individual moral responsibility to larger systems of meaning. "During the war," Camus continues, "I met people who could justify anything, torture, murder, betrayal, by appealing to higher purposes. The Nazi believed in the cosmic significance of race. The communist believed in the historical necessity of revolution. Both were willing to sacrifice individual human beings for their abstract meanings." Sêneca nods slowly, beginning to understand the personal urgency behind Camus's philosophy. "So you're saying that abstract meaning becomes dangerous when it overrides immediate human responsibility?" "Exactly. When you ground meaning in cosmic order, you create a hierarchy where abstract principles matter more than concrete human beings. But when meaning comes from human choice, from our immediate experience of value, then every person becomes irreducibly important." "But surely you see the problem," Sêneca responds. "Without some shared foundation for meaning, some common understanding of cosmic order, society dissolves into chaos. How do you prevent your philosophy from becoming mere relativism?" Camus laughs, but it's a laugh edged with pain. "You think my philosophy leads to relativism? Look around you, Lucius. Look at the violence done in the name of absolute truth, cosmic order, divine command. The relativists aren't the ones starting wars or building concentration camps. That's not fair, Sêneca objects. I'm not advocating for violence or oppression. Stoicism teaches us to treat all humans as part of the same rational cosmic community. I know you're not, Camus acknowledges, his tone softening, but your cosmic community is still abstract. It's still based on the idea that humans matter because they participate in some larger rational order. What happens to the humans who don't fit your definition of rational? What happens when your cosmic order conflicts with immediate human need? The question strikes at something deep in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed in natural law, in rational cosmic order, in the idea that the universe itself provides guidance for human behavior. But what happens when that guidance conflicts with human compassion? Consider this scenario, Camus continues. A child is dying of hunger. Your cosmic order might tell you this is natural, part of the rational flow of events, perhaps even necessary for some greater good. My absurdist rebellion tells me to feed the child, not because the universe commands it, but because the child's hunger offends my sense of human dignity. That's not how Stoicism works, Sêneca protests. We're not passive fatalists. We believe in acting according to virtue, which includes compassion and justice. But your compassion comes from duty to cosmic order, Camus points out. Mine comes from direct human solidarity. When duty and solidarity conflict, which do you choose? It's a profound challenge, and Sêneca recognizes it as such. The Stoic tradition has always struggled with the tension between rational acceptance and moral action. How do you accept the cosmic order while simultaneously working to change injustice within it? You're asking me to choose between reason and emotion, Sêneca responds, but I believe reason and proper emotion align when we truly understand our place in the cosmic order. And I'm saying that's the dangerous assumption, Camus counters. The moment you assume alignment between your rational system and human need, you stop listening to actual human voices. You start explaining away their suffering instead of responding to it. The debate has moved beyond academic philosophy into the realm of lived ethics. These aren't abstract questions about death and meaning. They're concrete questions about how to respond to human suffering in a world that offers no clear guidance. So how do you prevent your philosophy from becoming anarchic? Sêneca asks. If everyone creates their own meaning, if there's no shared foundation, how do you build justice or community? Through conversation exactly like this one, Camus responds immediately. Through the recognition that we're all in the same absurd situation, all trying to create meaning in an indifferent universe. That shared condition creates solidarity more real than any abstract principle. But what about those who choose to create meaning through domination, through violence? Camus's expression grows serious. Then we resist them, not because cosmic order commands resistance, but because their choices threaten the very possibility of human meaning creation. We fight for the right to create meaning, which includes fighting against those who would impose their meanings on others. The philosophical battle has revealed its true stakes. How should conscious beings live together in a universe that provides no clear instructions for living? Sêneca advocates for shared rational understanding of cosmic order. Camus advocates for shared recognition of cosmic absurdity. Both are trying to find grounds for human community, but through fundamentally different paths. The tavern's atmosphere has grown heavier, charged with the intensity of ideas being pushed to their breaking points. Both philosophers know they're approaching the crucial test. How do their philosophies handle the ultimate challenges of human existence? Sêneca straightens in his chair, preparing to launch what he clearly considers his strongest argument. Albert, let me pose a concrete scenario that will test both our philosophies. Imagine you're facing execution tomorrow morning. You have one night left to think about your life, your choices, your relationships. How does your absurdist rebellion help you in that moment? It's not a hypothetical question for Sêneca. He faced exactly this situation when Nero ordered his death. The weight of lived experience gives his words additional gravity. Camus considers carefully before responding. In that moment, I wouldn't waste time seeking cosmic justification for my life or trying to fit my death into some rational pattern. I would think about the concrete things I've loved, the real human connections I've made, the actual experiences that have felt meaningful to me. But without any foundation beyond arbitrary human choice, wouldn't those memories feel hollow? Wouldn't the knowledge that everything ends in meaninglessness drain them of significance? No, Camus responds with surprising firmness. That's where you misunderstand absurdism completely. The fact that meaning comes from human choice doesn't make it arbitrary, it makes it precious. When I remember a sunset I watched with someone I loved, the fact that both the sunset and the love were temporary doesn't diminish them, it intensifies them. But knowing that your love, your beloved, your memory of the sunset will all disappear completely, how can that not lead to despair? Camus takes a long draw from his cigarette, his eyes distant as if he's genuinely imagining that final night. Because the alternative is worse, Lucius. The alternative is to love conditionally, to experience beauty only when it's guaranteed by cosmic order, to connect with others only when connection serves some abstract purpose. That's not really loving at all. That's using love as a means to philosophical security. So you prefer authentic temporariness to eternal meaning? Sêneca asks. I prefer authentic human experience to philosophical consolation, Camus clarifies. Your eternal meaning isn't really eternal anyway. It's just your particular interpretation of cosmic order. In 100 years, 1,000 years, human beings might understand the universe completely differently. Your rational cosmic order might seem as arbitrary as my human rebellion. Sêneca frowns, recognizing the challenge to the universal validity of Stoic philosophy. But surely you admit that some interpretations of existence are more rational, more coherent than others. More coherent, yes. More useful for certain purposes, absolutely. But more true in some ultimate sense? I'm not convinced that question even makes sense. Camus leans forward intently. Let me turn your scenario around. Imagine you're facing execution, convinced that your death serves the rational cosmic order. But then you discover that your understanding of that order was completely wrong, that the universe operates according to completely different principles than you believed. Does that revelation retroactively make your entire life meaningless? It's a devastating question, striking at the heart of any philosophy that grounds meaning in correct understanding of objective reality. If meaning depends on cosmic truth, then error about cosmic truth threatens all meaning. That's different, Sêneca objects. Even if my particular understanding was flawed, the reality of cosmic order remains. My commitment to rational virtue would still be valuable even if I misunderstood some details. But how do you know you're not misunderstanding fundamental principles rather than mere details? How do you know your entire framework isn't based on a misconception about the nature of reality? Camus has identified the epistemological problem that haunts all objective theories of meaning. How can finite beings ever be certain they've correctly understood infinite reality? You're asking me to doubt everything, Sêneca responds. But total skepticism is as much a philosophical position as total certainty. If you can't trust reason to understand reality, what can you trust? I trust human experience, Camus answers immediately, not as a guide to cosmic truth, but as the foundation for human meaning. When I experience love, beauty, friendship, justice, I don't need cosmic validation to know these things matter to me. The mattering is immediate, undeniable, real. But individual experience is notoriously unreliable, Sêneca points out. People experience meaning in hatred, in domination, in cruelty, If individual experience is your only guide, how do you distinguish between authentic and inauthentic experiences of meaning? Camus nods appreciatively. Now you're asking the right question. And the answer is through dialogue, through confrontation with other experiences, through the recognition that authentic meaning creation requires acknowledging the equal capacity of others to create meaning. Hatred and domination deny that equality. They're attempts to impose one person's meaning on others. So you do have objective criteria for authentic meaning, Sêneca observes. I have criteria that emerge from the logic of meaning creation itself, Camus corrects. If meaning comes from human choice, then authentic meaning must preserve the possibility of choice for all humans. It's not cosmic objectivity, it's practical necessity. The debate has reached a fascinating point. Both philosophers are trying to ground ethics in their understanding of reality, but they're using fundamentally different concepts of what constitutes reality's foundation. Sêneca grounds ethics in cosmic rational order. Camus grounds ethics in the conditions necessary for human meaning creation. But doesn't your position collapse into subjectivism? Sêneca presses. If meaning comes from human choice, and if different humans make different choices, then you have no way to adjudicate between conflicting meanings. I have the same way you do, Camus responds. Through argument, persuasion, and when necessary, resistance. The difference is that I'm honest about the fact that this process has no cosmic backing. When I argue for justice, I'm not claiming the universe supports me. I'm making a human appeal to other humans based on our shared condition. And you think that makes your argument stronger? I think it makes them more honest, Camus says, and ultimately more respectful of the people I'm trying to persuade. The philosophical contest continues, each mind pushing the other toward greater precision, greater depth, greater authenticity in their approaches to the fundamental questions of human existence. As the candle burns lower, casting longer shadows across their weathered faces, both philosophers sense they're approaching the climax of their intellectual duel. The weight of the night's conversation has built to this moment, where philosophical abstraction must meet the raw reality of human choice. Sêneca leans back in his chair, studying Camus with the intensity of someone preparing for a final gambit. Albert, I want to return to something you said earlier about resistance. You claim we should resist those who impose their meanings on others. But resistance requires action. Action requires choice, and choice requires criteria for decision. Without cosmic grounding, your criteria are ultimately arbitrary. Are they? Camus responds, his voice carrying a new edge of certainty. Let me tell you about a moment during the war when I had to choose between competing meanings. I was working with the resistance, and we captured a collaborator, someone who had betrayed Jews to the Nazis. Some of my comrades wanted to execute him immediately. Others wanted to use him to feed false information to the Germans. The tavern seems to grow quieter as Camus continues, his words carrying the weight of lived moral complexity. According to your cosmic order, Lucius, what was the rational choice? According to divine command, natural law, universal principles, what should I have done? Sêneca considers carefully. The rational choice would depend on which action served the greater good, which decision aligned with cosmic justice. But who determines what cosmic justice requires in that specific situation? Camus challenges. You? Me? Some abstract principle that somehow magically resolves all moral complexity. The beautiful thing about cosmic order is that it's always clear to the person invoking it. That's unfair, Sêneca objects. Moral reasoning requires careful deliberation, consideration of consequences, understanding of universal principles. And while you're deliberating about universal principles, real human beings are suffering, Camus responds. The Jews being betrayed can't wait for us to achieve cosmic certainty about the nature of justice. So, what did you choose? Sêneca asks quietly. Camus extinguishes his cigarette slowly, deliberately. I chose based on immediate human solidarity. The collaborator was human, deserving of basic dignity despite his betrayal. The Jews being hunted were human, deserving of protection despite their vulnerability. I couldn't resolve the cosmic significance of the situation, but I could respond to its human dimensions, which was, we kept him prisoner but didn't execute him. We used him to save lives while preserving his own. Not because the universe commanded it, but because it honored the human dignity of everyone involved. Sêneca nods slowly. But you're proving my point. You made a rational decision based on universal principles, human dignity, proportional response, mercy, tempered with justice. These are cosmic values, even if you don't want to admit it. Camus shakes his head vigorously. No, they're human values that I chose to uphold in that situation. The difference isn't semantic, it's fundamental. When I choose human dignity, I'm taking responsibility for that choice. When you choose human dignity because cosmic order commands it, you're avoiding responsibility by delegating it to abstract principles. But delegation to rational principles is how we transcend individual bias and emotion, Sêneca argues. It's how we make decisions that serve the common good rather than personal preference. And it's also how we avoid the weight of moral choice, Camus counters. How we convince ourselves that our decisions are inevitable rather than chosen. When you act according to cosmic order, you can always tell yourself you had no choice. You were simply following rational necessity. The philosophical battle has reached its core, the question of moral responsibility itself. Sêneca believes grounding ethics in cosmic order makes moral choice more objective and reliable. Camus believes it makes moral choice less authentic and less responsible. Consider the implications of your position, Sêneca presses. If moral choice is purely human creation with no cosmic backing, then every atrocity in history was simply the result of humans making different choices than you would make. Hitler chose domination, you choose resistance, but cosmically neither choice has more validity than the other. It's perhaps Seneca's strongest challenge, and Camus recognizes its weight. The question of how to condemn evil without cosmic backing for moral judgment is central to any philosophy that rejects objective meaning. You're right that I can't condemn Hitler by appealing to cosmic authority, Camus acknowledges, but I can condemn him by appealing to something more fundamental, the conditions necessary for human meaning creation itself. Hitler didn't just make different moral choices, he attempted to destroy the very possibility of choice for millions of people. So you do have objective criteria, Sêneca observes. I have criteria that emerge from the nature of human consciousness itself, Camus clarifies. If meaning comes from human choice, then anything that destroys the capacity for choice destroys the possibility of meaning. It's not cosmic objectivity, it's logical necessity. But why should logical necessity matter if the universe is truly indifferent? Camus pauses, recognizing that Sêneca has pushed him to articulate something he's been circling around all night. Because we're not the universe, Lucius. We're human beings trapped in the universe, trying to create pockets of meaning within cosmic indifference. The logical necessity comes from our nature as meaning-creating beings, not from the nature of reality as a whole. So human nature provides the foundation for ethics? Human nature provides the context for ethics, Camus corrects. The foundation is our choice to honor that nature, rather than betray it. The distinction is crucial. Sêneca seeks foundations that exist independently of human choice. Camus seeks foundations that emerge from the logic of human choice itself. And death? Sêneca asks, returning to their original question. How does your philosophy help when facing the ultimate threat to human choice and meaning creation? Camus considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. It helps by refusing false consolation. When I die, my capacity for meaning creation ends. That's tragic, absurd, final. But acknowledging that tragedy honestly is more respectful of what I've lost than pretending it fits into some cosmic plan. So you face death without hope? I face death without illusion, Camus responds. But hope. The hope comes from knowing that other human beings will continue the struggle, will continue creating meaning, will continue the rebellion against absurdity. Not because the universe guarantees their success, but because they choose to continue. The candle has burned down to almost nothing, its flame wavering in the pre-dawn air that seeps through the tavern's windows. Both philosophers sit in contemplative silence, the intensity of their debate having given way to something deeper. Not agreement, but mutual respect for the profound complexity of the questions they've been exploring. Sêneca speaks first, his voice carrying a new note of reflection. You know, Albert, I've been thinking about something you said earlier, about authentic temporariness versus eternal meaning. Perhaps I've been guilty of what you accused me of, using philosophy as a form of security rather than wisdom. Camus looks up, surprised by the admission. How so? When I was facing my own death, when Nero's messenger came with the order to die, I spent my final hours giving philosophical lectures to my friends. I quoted Stoic principles, spoke about the rationality of death, demonstrated cosmic acceptance. Sêneca pauses, his expression troubled. But looking back, I wonder if I was performing philosophy rather than living it. What do you mean? I mean that maybe I was so concerned with dying like a proper Stoic that I forgot to die like a human being. Maybe I was more invested in validating my philosophical system than in honestly facing my own mortality. It's a remarkable admission from someone who has spent the night defending rational cosmic order against the challenges of absurdist rebellion. Camus considers this carefully. But perhaps that's not entirely wrong, Lucius. Your philosophical principles weren't just abstract ideas. They were ways of making sense of your experience, ways of creating meaning in the face of political tyranny and personal mortality. But you've shown me that there's a difference between creating meaning and discovering it, Sêneca responds. I've always believed I was discovering eternal truths about cosmic order, but maybe I was creating human interpretations of my experience and then projecting them onto the universe. And maybe that's not such a terrible thing, Camus says, surprising himself with the admission. The fact that your meaning was human-created doesn't make it less valuable. It might make it more valuable, more honest about its origins, more authentic to your actual experience. The conversation has taken an unexpected turn. Where earlier they were opponents in philosophical combat, now they're exploring the possibility that their positions might be complementary rather than contradictory. I've been thinking about your resistance work, Sêneca continues. When you chose to preserve that collaborator's life while using him to save others, you weren't just following arbitrary preference. You were expressing values, human dignity, proportional justice, mercy, that feel universal even if they don't have cosmic backing. Yes, but I was choosing to honor those values, Camus emphasizes. I wasn't discovering them in the structure of reality. That choice, that act of valuing, is what made them meaningful in that situation. But perhaps the distinction isn't as absolute as we've been assuming, Sêneca suggests. Perhaps cosmic order and human choice aren't mutually exclusive alternatives. Perhaps what I've been calling cosmic order is actually the accumulated wisdom of human choice-making over centuries. Camus nods thoughtfully. And perhaps what I've been calling human rebellion includes an acknowledgement that some choices are more authentically human than others. We're not starting from nothing when we create meaning. We're working with the reality of human nature, human needs, human capacities. The philosophical battle has transformed into something else, a recognition that both thinkers are trying to address the same fundamental challenge of conscious existence, but from different angles. The question of death remains, Sêneca observes. Even if we can reconcile our approaches to meaning and ethics, we still face the fact of mortality. True, Camus agrees, but maybe that's where our perspectives can complement each other. Your Stoicism offers tools for facing death with dignity and rational acceptance. My absurdism offers tools for living with urgency and passionate engagement. Perhaps the fullest human response to mortality requires both. How so? Well, consider this, Camus continues, warming to the idea. When someone I love is dying, I need your Stoic wisdom to accept what I cannot change, to find peace with the natural reality of death. But I also need absurdist rebellion to fight for every moment, to create meaning in the face of loss, to refuse the temptation of premature resignation. Sêneca smiles for the first time all night. So wisdom lies not in choosing between acceptance and rebellion, but in knowing when each response is appropriate. Something like that. Maybe the error isn't in our individual philosophies, but in thinking that any single philosophical approach can address the full complexity of human existence. Outside the tavern, the first hints of dawn are appearing on the horizon. The night of philosophical combat is ending, but both men sense that their conversation has opened new possibilities rather than closing old questions. I have a confession to make, Sêneca says quietly. When I was preparing to die, when I drank the poison Nero commanded, there was a moment, just a moment, when all my philosophical preparation fell away. In that instant, I wasn't a Stoic philosopher demonstrating rational acceptance. I was just a human being, facing the unknown, terrified and alone. And in that moment, were you less wise or more wise than in your philosophical speeches? Camus asks gently. I don't know, Sêneca admits, but I was more honest. Then maybe that's where wisdom begins, Camus suggests. Not in having the right philosophical system, but in being honest about our actual experience of existence, including the parts that don't fit our systems. Including the absurdity, Sêneca asks with a slight smile. Especially the absurdity, Camus confirms, and including the very human desire to find rational order in apparent chaos. As the dawn light grows stronger, both philosophers realize their debate has led them not to victory or defeat, but to a deeper appreciation of the questions that originally brought them together. The fear of death, the search for meaning, the challenge of living authentically in an uncertain universe, these remain as compelling and complex as ever. Perhaps, Sêneca suggests, the real question isn't whether death is something to fear or simply the end. Perhaps the real question is how to live fully in the space between birth and death, knowing that the space is temporary, but not knowing what, if anything, lies beyond it. Now that, Camus responds, raising his glass in a gesture that feels like both conclusion and beginning, is a question worth spending a lifetime exploring. The candle finally flickers out, but the dawn light is sufficient to illuminate their faces as they sit in companionable silence, two great minds having discovered that the deepest philosophical questions are not problems to be solved, but realities to be lived.